So, welcome back, everyone. I've heard sessions provided some very interesting discussions. I had the opportunity myself to attend the one on the single market and European economy. There's a wealth of experience there, and unfortunately, there's not enough opportunity. So I really encourage those who had very fruitful feedback for us to contact us also. If they don't have the opportunity here to send us via email, because most of you are very experienced into your own subjects, so I really welcome that. But it's important to ensure that the audience who are here with us, the entire audience, is aware of the key points that were discussed during these breakout sessions. And unfortunately, they were not unable to attend all of them. I would like to invite the moderators of each of the session to very quickly sum up the key points raised here. So in this order, Mark, Gabriel, and Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. I won't take long. Basically, we've had a very interesting discussion on the single market. We started by explaining what a huge project the single market was. Actually, probably the EU's greatest achievement aside from decades of peace. We summed up what the single market has achieved so far, which is a relative level of harmonization of rules allowed which allows businesses and citizens to move across borders and provide goods and services across borders. We also showed the problems that have come out of COVID from the single market. Basically, member states were putting up unilateral barriers and stopping the free flow of trade. And this was an issue which persisted for some time until of course member states and the Commission got their house in order with regards to the unprecedented pandemic that we were facing. We also turned to the audience to get their feedback as well. We had an interesting discussion on protectionism, where basically single market policy has been hampered over the last few years due to member states bringing up protectionist issues and protecting SMEs at home rather than ensuring that EU SMEs are treated in the same way. This is something which absolutely has to stop. I cannot emphasize this enough. We also had an interesting point made about SME access to public procurement, where basically SMEs are not given the same access to public contracts in the same way that large companies are, and that something should be done about this. A very interesting comment was made on the applications on the harmonization of regulation, basically on the applications of contract law specifically, whereby while we have a single market, certain legal issues are not harmonized, such as of course contract law. So you go to another member state prepared to do business your way, and of course suddenly you have to abide with a bunch of different rules and laws and regulations of another member state, which is actually a form of non-tariff barrier due to the different legal systems. That there is no contractual baseline where companies can be familiar with. We had a very interesting discussion on AI. Sadly, I had to cut that short. The point that was put forward was that the EU needs to improve funding and implementation on digitization itself first, rather than on the short term and medium term, rather than focusing on AI. AI research, of course, needs to be stimulated. However, the basic digitization of SMEs need to be improved, because there are a bunch of SMEs which are, of course, still stuck in the past. Return on digitization in the short and medium term is indeed crucial before AI work needs to be considered. This was the point that was mostly put forward, and that would bring a wrap to the single market session.
Thank you, Mark. Gabriel?
Thank you, Joe. Our session focused on environment and sustainability. It was a very interesting discussion, and we had experts, we had participants who are experts in various different fields, who all brought their own different perspectives to the issue. Some key points which emerge is that, first of all, there's a positive outlook on the perspective of the EU's role when it comes to environment and sustainability. The participants saw that the EU acts as a sort of leadership and guidance when it comes to setting the standard for sustainability in the member states. However, a key concern was on the issue of setting targets, and especially long-term targets. The participants felt that setting targets for 2050 and even 2035 and 2030, it's too far away and it's too long, and member states, especially member states which aren't the best performing in Europe, would benefit from shorter term targets that actually serve as sort of stepping stones until the end goal of climate neutrality in 2050, for example. And the participants also mentioned that having a 2030 deadline, for example, across the board for every single issue does not make sense, because some issues require technology which is readily available, so 2030 is too far away and it doesn't make sense to wait that long, while certain issues require increased research and development, and having a 7 to 10 year gap between setting the deadline and the actual deadline is too short and won't allow enough room to actually develop this technology. The discussion also moved on to the issue of barriers to investment in energy efficiency mainly, but also sustainability more generally. So obviously the usual culprits have been mentioned, so lack of knowledge within companies, the administrative burdens that companies face in order to implement these investments. But I think the most important point which was mentioned is that we have to consider the current economic situation which we are operating in. So we are just emerging out of a pandemic. Many businesses are, at the end of the day, looking to survive at the moment. So they will not invest in these types of projects unless they receive financial support or financial incentives in order to support this investment. And at the end of the day, these types of investments should not be targeted simply at the business themselves, but we also mentioned that incentives have to be targeted at consumers and users of the end product as well. This is especially so, for example, when it comes to sustainable mobility, which should actually incentivize users to use the more sustainable option rather than the traditional and sort of the more polluting option. So environmental protection and sustainability is not just a business responsibility, but it's in the common good. We also mentioned the need that obviously each country has its own particularities and its own challenges, so we should not treat every single country or every single region in the EU the same. We should account for their own challenges. And this point also relates to the issue of having tailored regional strategies in across Europe with dedicated financing tied to that region-specific challenge. The participants also believe that having macro solutions, such as this overarching 2030 target that encompasses the whole of Europe, will not help member states move forward. And on the issue of financing, we mentioned the importance of having dedicated grants rather than tax credits, since many businesses are flooded with tax credits at the moment, and increasing their supply of tax credits will not actually incentivize investment. And also EU funds are quite difficult to tap, and you have no guarantee that you will actually get the funds at the end of the process. So the most attractive option has been identified as government grants. That is all from our breakout session. So thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. And last but not least, Daniel.
Thank you, Joe. In the Future of Work session, we of course discussed the labor market challenges, which are not new. They have been with us for a while. We had a vote as to on the most important ones, and not surprisingly, the digitalization or automation was the most popular. Of course, we discussed, and it was pointed out, that this is already a European priority. It features across the board. However, we need to improve on the timing of the rolling out of EU support and policies in this area. There's also the aspect of digital skills linked to it, and the rapid pace as to which digitalization is moving forward at the workplace. However, the educational institutions unfortunately do not keep up with it, and therefore it was mentioned that the EU could play a stronger role despite its limited competencies in this field to encourage faster pace for educational institutions to keep up with what's the digitalization transformation of the workplace. We also touched upon the impact of the crisis we just been through on the tourism sector and the lack of skills that it left in the sector because of the fact that most foreign workers have left the island and other local workers have moved to different sectors. And that is why it was mentioned that EU mobility programs could, of course, play an important role in addressing this issue. We mentioned the increased financial resource for Erasmus that will take place with this new EU funding period, but also the introduction of a new program called ALMA, announced by the European Commission President in the State of the Union speech last week. We have little details about it so far, but it will work more or less similar like Erasmus, but for graduates. So we'll be on the lookout for that as well. When it comes to remote working, another elephant in the room, because of the way it accelerated during COVID, the preference of all participants was that we will go back to hybrid models. Let's say teleworking or remote working worked. However, there needs to be a balance between the two. But there also needs to be, it was mentioned that there needs to be more regulatory framework for this kind of practice, although one would prefer for there to be flexibility and localization opportunities when it comes to implementing locally, according to the different sizes of companies, different sectors they operate in, etc. Finally, we asked a very simple question as to whether the participants would prefer more powers for the European Union in the areas of education and skills, training and employment policies, or more flexibility, and it was quite a balanced outcome. With slightly preference for those that would prefer more powers. But obviously that's a complex question in its own, which would have merited a session discussion purely on that point. So we'll leave it as that. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues, for moderating 3 interesting sessions. And thank you also to the 3 guest speakers from EUROCHAMBRES, Erwan, Stephanie, and Adam, who provided us the basis for the discussion. Now we would like to move on to the last and final session in plenary format, as it is a subject which affects all facets of European policymaking, and so by extension, all of us. Taking charge of this topic will be Ms. Lina Constantinopoulou. I hope I got it right there. Very good. Policy Director of EUROCHAMBRES, who will speak about how the EU can become more business friendly. Lina, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the whole colleagues for the invitation. Of course, it's a pleasure to be here with you today and engage in this consultation of the future of Europe. Allow me first to briefly explain on how I understand the rule of law and democracy and why this impacts every business towards a more business-friendly EU. I would like also to give you a bit the role of EUROCHAMBRES into making sure how we as business are contributing to better regulation and, of course, on governance process. Let me state, of course, the obvious. So democracy, rule of law, fundamental rights are the 3 pillars of forming the bedrock of the European Union. And the Conference of the Future of Europe is, of course, an exercise in democracy. And what I have seen is that more than 400 million Europeans at the moment are engaging in these discussions. And I think we need to bring our views in this, of course, democratic debate and form a basis on to understand what as business we want from the EU in the future. Now, all aspects, of course, of the business operations are decided at the EU level. through the various policies and regulations. Businesses have repeatedly called for relief for an endless stream of new EU regulations and rules and requirements, which create, of course, unnecessary complexity, costs in their day-to-day operations. We have seen also numerous examples of legislations which have been brought forward, which does not add value and are very burdensome for SMEs. We have also seen a lot of EU rules which are disproportionately costly for businesses, especially for small businesses without any evidence of benefits. For example, now we have this proposal for Corporate Sustainable Reporting Directive. Of course, the future of the European business depends on the removal of this unnecessary burdensome regulation. And as Greek, I would like to say that Pericles of Athens, who was the inventor of democracy, said, although only a few may originate a policy, we are all able to judge it. That's saying that we need a transparent decision-making in order to ensure that all the EU functions properly. Now, for that, we have the better regulation. And it's all about improving the quality of policy and lawmaking. And we ensure that all the EU rules are, of course, evidence-based. Now, it is also about ensuring that we take decisions transparently and we involve everyone in the whole process. Now, when Ursula von der Leyen became the European Commission President in 2019, she pledged to put better regulation, of course, at the heart of the European Commission work. But we have seen that there was a continuous postponement of this communication on better regulation, and that means that little has changed now into 2021. Now, better regulation is about a shared responsibility to its stakeholders. We need to involve all business representatives, such as EUROCHAMBRES and also the national chambers of commerce, in the consultation process of the various policies. Why? Because it raises the interests and needs of our business community. Of course, broader regional and national effort could, of course, make a huge difference in that. So improving lawmaking, reducing burdens for business is not only the Commission work. We have seen that this could be also an interinstitutional effort. For example, European Parliament and also the Council, who can be part of this activity. Now, the consultation procedures during the impact assessment phase is very cumbersome. We have seen and noted too many problems in several consultations, lasting less than 12 weeks, running over holiday periods and during economic challenging times. For example, we had the COVID period. And of course, this reduces the possibility of participation, both from the national chamber point of view or our SME participation or representativeness. Now, with regards to the quality of the impact assessment of policies, there needs to be evidence-based. So the Commission should strive to include national business association in the process of data gathering. Now, according to that, we also have the Fit for Future platform, which is a broad representation of interests, providing expert input to the Commission. Now, for that, we have seen that this platform, unfortunately, is not advancing as well. Now, to conclude this first part of the speech, if I had one point to make, is really to urge the Maltese business community to keep actively contributing to the Conference on the Future of Europe. We need to create an active dialogue at the grassroots level. We need to mobilize young entrepreneurs to make a bit the promise of economic democracy a reality. And we need to support and engage SMEs and listen to what they have to say. So this is for me as the first, let's say, first part of this discussion, Joe. We can't hear you, Joe?
Joe, you're muted.
Yes.
Very good. I hope they didn't do it on purpose. So, Lina, from your experience, would you say EU regulations are SME friendly?
Well, they have to be. They must be SME friendly. SMEs are, of course, an important part of the European economy. And you have to correct me. In Malta, you have 93.1% of value added to the economy comes from SMEs. So it's a huge number. So the whole European economic crisis caused by COVID, of course, has put a lot of strain in the SME community. We need to make sure that whatever regulation is out, it's fit for purpose, of course, for the SME community as well. And if we want SMEs to drive through the twin digital transition and sustainable transition, we need a regulatory environment that allows them to thrive. Now, let me remind everyone what is the think small first. This is a principle which applies to policymakers to give a full consideration to SMEs at the early policy development phase. So what is important is that this think small first needs to be applied to all new EU regulations that are coming into the forefront. But unfortunately, we have seen so many issues coming out, a lot of flaws in the application of SME tests. So, for example, the last SME test benchmark analyzed 13 impact assessments where failed to apply the whole concept of better regulation and this think small principle. So we need also, of course, the absence of this huge cost-benefit analysis provides a huge issue also to the SME needs. So I am also aware that you also have a Maltese SME envoy, and his involvement in this issue is fundamental. So we also urge to have an EU SME envoy as fast as possible to making sure that we have a structured and assistance to SMEs in order to fulfill these better regulation objectives. Now, the huge message that we give is we need an EU legislation which is well designed and SME tested, and is also minimize fiscal and administrative burdens.
Very good. Sorry. Wait. Sorry, I must have touched the wrong button. Lina, there are a number of businesses here with us today and a number of business leaders, and they expect us, and that includes us as Malta Business Bureau, to walk the talk, you know. So if I can ask you, what are EUROCHAMBRES recommendations at this stage to ensure that legislation is fit for purpose and ensuring that legislation is SME friendly? How can we ensure?
I think it's very important that we are part of the stakeholder consultation process, and we are, as business community and as national chambers of commerce, we need to be part of the discussion. We can also support the European Commission as such in providing a lot of contribution also on data gathering, on the impact assessments. We can even provide a lot of information on our own SME communities. And the last but not least, as I said before, the national SME envoy his role is fundamental. So if we have to pass our messages and our concerns and our challenges is to this person. And for sure, all the national SME envoys could also provide a kind of, let's say, provide a huge effort, huge support also to the role of the EU SME envoy, who needs, of course, to fulfill, of course, these better regulation objectives. So again, let's try to make our contribution also to a continuous assessment of the SME tests. I know that this is a very cumbersome work to be done. We have done it already in the past years. We hope that we are able to do it again together with the European Commission. And it would be even more difficult now with the new EU updated industrial strategy and the whole 14 ecosystems, and their SMEs are again depicted in different, let's say, ecosystems approach. And this would also be, let's say, another challenge. And we think that we can support as well in this process as well.
Very good. Lina, with your permission, if you allow me, I would like to invite anyone who is with us today. If he or she would like to share his or her experience in terms of dealing with EU regulation in itself, that they felt restricted their operations. There were some other interventions in the breakout session which I attended earlier, but I would like to give this opportunity. So invitation to all the participants who are here with us. If you could raise a hand or. Do we have anyone?
Andre.
Andre?
Okay, can I? For those who don't know me, I'm Andre Fenek. I'm the head of policy here at the Malta Chamber of Commerce. More of a comment continuing on what Ms. Konstantinopoulou was saying earlier. The think small first. We feel at times that even in that regard, when the Commission, for example, comes and does a review in Malta, it does not really recognize the small size of our situation, of our market, of our SMEs, which really and truly are also made up of, there's a big chunk also of micro enterprises as well on the island, as well as other countries, don't get me wrong. But of course, I think being cognizant at times, even of the Commission officials who are technically meant to be experts on Malta, and in many cases you have European Commission officials who are dedicated to the country and are not really aware of the specificities of an island state, of we've been discussing for so many years, for example, in terms of the issue of state aid, for example, in regional policy, and how this affects island states such as Malta and Cyprus, and the fact that we are treated completely different from the way other island regions are treated, for example. This is just one example. I'm just pointing it out because, of course, it was raised before, the think small first. Yes, think small first, and in terms of the SME Small Business Act, for example, in Malta, we were amongst the first member states to introduce certain measures in the country. For example, we have what is known as the Enterprise Consultative Council, where there's a group that meets on a quarterly basis, and we discuss specific issues related to the single market and its impact on local operators with the government stakeholders, amongst others, together with the business lobbies such as the chamber. But the reality is that we feel that every time the European Commission legislates or regulates, and here is more of a generic comment, it does, yes, take into consideration the small-sized enterprises, but when you're considering an SME in Germany and an SME in Malta, it's a very different picture altogether. So I think it's being cognizant of the situation of each individual member state more than anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Another supplementary question. There's Kevin who would like to intervene. Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Joe. I just wanted to expand further on a point mentioned by Andre, my colleague at the Chamber of Commerce. Basically, during our breakout session, there was an interesting point made by our colleague from EUROCHAMBRES, mentioning that we can have the nicest rule book in the world, but we need to get it implemented. Otherwise, it will be of no use to us. And in case of a small micro island states at the periphery of the European Union, certainly there are intrinsic costs which are being carried by the manufacturers, by importers, which unfortunately is rendering our products less competitive when compared to continental Europe. So there is unlevel playing field due to our geographic realities as an island at the periphery of the European Union. Even having a transshipment coming to the bottom end of the continent only for us would be unfeasible in terms of finances. And we have the legal tool to use more frequently in policy making, which is Article 174, which recognizes this particular specificity of island states in the European Union. And having seen the manufacturing sector, for example, so resilient during the pandemic, I guess there is much more potential as part of the single market to Maltese manufacturers to improve their productivity and also increase their trade internationally within the single market. So this is an obstacle which was not even captured in the survey done by EUROCHAMBRES, often because it is overlooked, this particular difficulty. And I see a role for EUROCHAMBRES in this case to bring us member states who are islands, and I reckon these are 3 of them, Cyprus, Malta, and Ireland, to come together and also help build up the case. And I know that this process has started also by the MBB president, also Alison Mitzi, on the Green Deal, because these are specific policies which will need this enabler, especially if we have the same ambitions and the same targets that we need to reach like other member states. But certainly we are not departing from the same point. And I think EUROCHAMBRES can help us in this cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for putting this into the perspective. For example, when we were discussing the national recovery plans, this was also put into the microscope. Why? Because again, the implementation of these national recovery plans will be even more difficult in regions, even more in islands. Again, I take the point for bridging, let's say, the needs and challenges of islands with respect to the SME needs. And yeah, we're more than welcome to discuss it further, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, with your permission, Lina, perhaps we could give the opportunity to someone else from the audience to share their experience on how this time the EU can be more business friendly in the future. You know, we are here to listen and to hear businesses. So it's an invitation to any one of you out there who would like to share the experience about how the EU can be more business friendly in terms of its work.
No one's going to speak. One thing I can say on behalf of all the businessmen I deal with in my environmental committees as a policy executive at the Chamber is that very often they don't have much insight into macro policy from the EU. So it's very difficult for them to plan for the future. So these are leading people in their fields. So it's not a question of the man in the street not knowing what the EU is doing, but leading businessmen who find it very difficult to understand what is being discussed on an EU level and therefore even make contributions to that discussion as well. So I think there needs to be better communication from the EU.
Thank you, Tim. Lina, there is a question from Mr. Stephen D'Alessandro. Intervention.
Yeah.
Hi. Over the years, I've been involved in a number of EU financed projects and taken part in a number of forums and workshop groups in Brussels. And I find that, you know, the EU in many ways is a soft target for us. You know, we can blame a lot of things on Brussels. And at the same time, I think we have to share in the blame in how we interpret that. I find that locally, a number of the authorities that are responsible for implementation of EU projects try to be holier than the Pope. And when you discuss the same issue in Brussels, there is a much more practical and pragmatic view. I remember a cost query over a €250 bill, and it must have cost thousands in terms of the meetings and reviews. And then, very conveniently, and other things, people are blind and things slip through. So the idea of being more business friendly has a lot to do with being cost effective. The EU has to set the example. Again, the classic case of having Brussels and Strasbourg. You've got to walk the talk. Credibility is something that people want to see in reality. So there's a lot to be done in that area. As we said, it's not a perfect institution, but hey, it's given us a lot of value added. From the Malta side, I think that the cost of control is an issue that has to be really given importance. If you look at, for example, when there was the 2008 recovery, all the funds went to the banks. They didn't get to the SMEs. We shored up the balance sheets of banks that screwed up badly. We tend to make the same mistakes. And SMEs who, I can't think of any bank that went into bankruptcy because it led too much to SMEs. Most of them got involved in shady deals or got involved in, let's say, lending to big boys which didn't have the backing. So the EU business friendliness, again, I talk from an SME perspective, is that the recognition of the importance of SMEs, because SMEs are just after the chance to operate, reduce the bureaucracy and let the organizations work. They can compete, they can create wealth. Thank you.
No, I agree that the whole one in out principle, as we call it, it's we see so many EU regulations coming into the forefront that there is no evidence, there is no clear impact assessment behind it. And as you say, we need to be cost effective, but most importantly, even in cost benefit analysis of all these new EU regulations, most of the time the whole SME principle is not at all taking into consideration. So for sure, I think we need to be more active, and again, the work that we are doing at the European front and with excellent support of your representatives from the Malta Business Bureau is really outstanding, because we are really trying to represent, let's say, the needs and challenges of the SMEs. So yeah, it's we have to keep trying, and again, is all about very good representation, and we ask for it, and we will have it.
Thank you, Lina. There are two further raised hands from Patrick Spiteri-Staines and Francois Breck. So the floor is yours, Patrick. Francois.
Thank you. What I would like to state is we spoke a lot about SMEs. SMEs, especially in Malta, tend to be of a very small size, verging on the micro SMEs, which means most companies don't have the overheads, don't have the time to be able to look not only at the macro legislation coming out of the EU, but even the micro legislation sometimes coming out of the EU. So I think that if we want to help SMEs in countries like Malta, which is an island state, we need to facilitate the transfer of information, and we need to facilitate their access to any of the instruments, grants, financing, etc., which are available. One other thing that I would like to mention is, in certain cases, businesses cannot expand their business in the hope that they are awarded an EU grant or an EU project, because that means that you have to sit and wait, you have to apply, and you, with your fingers crossed that you will be amongst the ones chosen. If you're not amongst the ones chosen, then your business or that part of your business cannot proceed. And this is, I think, a major stumbling block, because businesses need to develop from year to year on 3-year spans, 5-year spans, but they cannot have a stop-start process, which the funds available from the EU tend to have, with calls going out maybe once a year, then sometimes being delayed, then maybe they skip a year, depending on which call it is. So this is another aspect which complicates the life of SMEs in Malta. Thank you.
Thank you.
Francois?
Thanks, Joe. I think the point, as much as I agree with the added bureaucracy of utilizing EU instruments, usually tends to disincentivize SMEs from participating in the use of these type of activities. However, I feel the major strength, which at an EU level, from a policy perspective, it's something which could make a significant impact, is something related more to the single market. I spoke as well during the session on the single market. I think there is still an underlying lacking of the contractual standard which one can engage to as an SME by transacting across EU borders. Yes, we state about a single market. However, there are so much contractual obligations in different countries, and there is no, let's call it, baseline EU standard on how you can contractually fulfill a base contract or a centralized arbitration process. And I think the drive for this single activity can actually make a significant impact on the SME, because it will ease the barriers and increase the comfort zone of the entrepreneur to actually engage in cross-border business. Yes, yeah. I operate in another 3 countries. In each time I have to have a separate company with all its legal obligations to transact with, and it creates all more other complications. So establishing a common baseline, which one could entice in his contractual obligation with customers, would definitely come a long way. It's not easy, but I definitely think it's one policy element which would drive a significant impact to the SMEs across Europe and making the single market a bit more effective. Thank you.
Lina, and then I will obviously hand back to you. There's another raised hand by Christian Farrugia. So I kindly invite Christian to make his intervention. Thank you.
Hi, good morning all. Hi, Lina. What I wanted to point out, I come from the aerospace industry, right? From the aviation industry, which has become one of the fundamental pillars of, or one of the growing pillars of the Maltese economy in the past years. And I also now form part of a new business section within the Malta Chamber of Commerce, which seeks to represent all the operators and businesses within the industry locally. An aspect which was not mentioned, unless I missed it, was the recent Fit for 55 package, as well as the Energy Tax Directive changes that are being proposed by the European Union. I think, without taking a position on the subjects, I think that they are going to have a big influence, not only on the businesses which are present, Maltese air operator certificates which are present on the island, which are numbering over 40 with an aircraft register growing over 500 aircraft, which is a lot, but also on our accessibility, being an island state. Part of this package is obviously a suggestion to remove the exemption on aviation fuel for the aviation industry, with a 10-year proposed tax plan starting from a minimum rate next year up to 38 cents per liter in 2033, which is a lot. And another maybe even more relevant for the fact that we are an island state is a proposal to start shifting towards sustainable aviation fuels, ever more present, as a blend within the existing ones. So that has a major threat on our accessibility, in my opinion, as well as indirectly on the competitiveness of even all those, small SMEs who even want to grow, because, as far as accessibility goes, it creates issues because of increasing costs towards increasing costs incurred by all the operators serving the islands. So as it wasn't mentioned within this plenary and I didn't kind of grasp it earlier, I thought it is a very important point to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, if I may, just a quick reply to Christian, because he raised very interesting points. Christian was in my session on future of work, so perhaps these topics might have been discussed in the sustainability workshop. However, and here I address this to you, but also to everyone else, I would like to take the opportunity that we are organizing an event on the Fit for 55 package. More information will be coming, but it will be held in the beginning of December. So there will be more opportunities to discuss these issues further. I can tell you that we are following them quite closely. We have also already, or we had already contributed to public consultation on the Energy Tax Directive, so maybe we can also discuss bilaterally. I can tell you that our position all feeds into the EUROCHAMBERS positions. So EUROCHAMBERS obviously also represents our voice in that respect. Sometimes we may have also disagreements within the membership of EUROCHAMBERS. We might have different positions on each other, so we would have to balance each other out in that respect. However, I can assure you that we're taking this very seriously, and I welcome also your expertise and experience in this area, because ultimately our positions need to be based on feedback that we receive from members of our business community. So I would definitely take up contact with you, Christian, on this. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you to all the previous speakers and all those who made interventions. Some very, very interesting points, which are very, very helpful for us in our work here. So, Lina, I would like to invite you to conclude this very, very interesting part. So then we start to conclude, because we are running a little bit behind schedule. So, Lina, the floor is yours again. Thank you.
Thank you. So, for me, there are, I would say, two main points. Again, EuroChambre and its members are preparing, of course, for the next better regulation communication. And this is a great opportunity to put into place all these interesting comments and questions that we have received during the panel, during this panel session. We will also have the possibility to take into consideration the issues of the link with all this information taken at the macro level, and also to make sure about how can we ensure the new better regulation will fit, let's say, sustainability and digitalization, because let's not forget that the new better regulation will also look upon mainstreaming the UN goals, and also take into consideration a lot of strategic foresight. So saying that we need strategic foresight at a national level, and I know that there are quite a lot of interesting surveys that are coming into the fund. For example, the economic survey, European economic survey that is going to be launched in November is going to provide some kind of very interesting information on strategic foresight for our communities. And this could also be a great input also for the Commission. And again, the whole Green Deal, Fit for 55, digitalization will create a lot of implementation challenges. And again, we will need to put them into a perspective, especially under the better regulation. We need to be active for that. So finalizing my point, we will come back to, I'm sure your chamber will come back to you to ask you for your contribution on the next better regulation communication. And of course, we will be in touch with respect to all these key points, with respect to take into consideration also the island approach and the challenges that you face to make sure that as your needs are met. I think from my perspective, I think I have finalized my key points, Joe. Many thanks for this opportunity to be here today, and also for the team to be with you.
Yes,
really
thank you
highly appreciated.
Yes, thank you very much, Lena. We really enjoyed it. I mean, even how we collaborated together, and this all goes well because at the end of the day, we have business at heart, and so thank you very much for that. I will start concluding this session, but obviously I have first of all to thank all of you, all of attendees for your fruitful contributions, not only in relation to the breakout sessions, but also in this plenary. As I said earlier, we will follow up with you also, because I'm sure there are further contributions which time did not allow us to go into them. And so you will be hearing us again from us next week. I would like to thank MEP President Alison Mitzi and also EUROCHAMBERS CEO who found the time to come and join us because this is close at heart as a subject, and also for their excellent insights and setting the scene in terms of the opening up of this session. Obviously, I thank all EUROCHAMBERS speakers. Thank you very much. I obviously have to thank my team, thank the MEP moderators and technical team for your excellent support. So what's next? We have heard many interesting discussions on a wide range of topics. We will obviously be taking all this feedback we received from you today in consideration and draft our high-level declaration on the future of Europe. The declaration will be launched next month when the MEP celebrates its 25th anniversary. For people who don't know, MEP was set up by our predecessors, October 1996, so 25 years of service. I am very thankful to the people who saw this foresight, but also to the Malta Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Industry, and the Malta Hotels Restaurants Association for believing in this concept and in this journey. It will be presented, obviously, as well, more important, to the European Commission as part of the overarching conference on the future of Europe, as well as key policymakers in Brussels. We will be sure to keep you informed at all stages. With that, I thank you very much once again, and I wish you a good day. Thank you.